Narrated by Vokrath, Senior Intelligence Analyst, Dominion High Command. Field Log, Cycle 7441. Let me tell you something about confidence. Real, bone-deep, universe-bending confidence. The kind that makes a 37-ship battle fleet commander look at an uncharted planet, squint at the sensor readings and say, out loud with his chest out, "It is just a rock with animals." That commander was Admiral Ossivane, and I was standing right next to him when he said it. I want that on the official record. I was standing there. I tried to cough in a way that communicated doubt. Nobody listened. The planet was called by its own inhabitants Earth, which, if you translated it directly into Dominion Standard, meant something like dirt. They named their world after dirt. I noted this in my intelligence file and flagged it under a category I personally created called "Should be concerning but everyone will ignore it anyway." That file was very full by the end of the year. Humanity had been on our radar for approximately 40 cycles. They were a Class 3 civilization, which technically meant they had achieved interstellar travel, but had not yet joined any of the major galactic coalitions. In practice, what it meant was that nobody important had bothered to stop by and say hello, because Class 3 civilizations tended to be either boring, fragile, or both. Earth, according to our preliminary surveys, was covered in 70% liquid water. It had a thick nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, a magnetic field that was fine, admittedly impressive, and a surface teeming with what our biological division described in their report as, and I quote directly, an unnecessarily aggressive variety of multicellular life. Unnecessarily aggressive. Our chief biologist, Dr. Fenralava, had written that phrase and apparently felt no further explanation was required. I went back and asked her about it later. She looked at me with the kind of eyes that had clearly seen things. She said slowly, "Vokrath. Their ocean has creatures that predate their own civilization by millions of cycles. Their land predators evolved specifically to kill things that were much larger than themselves. Their bacteria have been at war with every immune system on that planet since before the dinosaurs. Everything on that world is fighting everything else, all the time. Constantly." I asked her why she had put that information in a footnote. She said she had assumed nobody would care. She was correct. Nobody cared. Admiral Ossivane's mission was not complicated, at least not on paper. The Dominion wanted a forward operating base in that sector of the galaxy. Earth was conveniently located. Humanity had not joined any coalition that would complicate a territorial claim. The plan was simple: arrive with overwhelming force, deliver a diplomatic ultimatum, establish terms, occupy the northern continent, and go home in time for the quarterly budget review. We brought 37 ships. 37. For context, the last planet we had formally occupied, Veritas 9, had a population of 11 billion and orbital defense platforms, and we had used 14 ships. 14. Ossivane had requested 37 for Earth because, as he explained in his mission briefing, and I am quoting him here, "I wanted to look impressive from the ground." He wanted the humans to look up and feel overwhelmed. He was very focused on the visual impact. The humans did look up. They were not overwhelmed. What they actually did, when our fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and hung over their atmosphere like a ceiling made of warships, was immediately start broadcasting on every frequency we were monitoring. And the broadcasts were not, as one might expect, panicked pleas for negotiation or emergency government transmissions. They were, and our communications team spent 3 full hours verifying this before reporting it, human beings on something called the Internet, describing what they were seeing and arguing about it, enthusiastically. Some of them were excited. One recurring message, translated, read approximately, "Oh, this is going to be so good." I added that to the concerning file. Ossivane sent the standard Dominion First Contact Ultimatum, a formal declaration of territorial intent, a list of demands, a 48-hour window for response, and a reminder that our weapons were capable of significant surface damage. Standard procedure. Very professional, very clear. The humans sent back a single representative. Her name was Commander Yael Ostrova. She appeared on our communications screen in a grey uniform, with short dark hair and the specific kind of calm expression that I had come to recognize in my career as the face of someone who was either completely fearless or had already made peace with every possible outcome. She looked at Ossivane. She looked at our bridge crew. She looked at me specifically for a moment that lasted slightly longer than was comfortable. Then she said, "We received your message. Before you continue, I need to ask you something." Ossivane was already leaning back in his chair with the posture of a man expecting to be begged. He said, "Ask." Ostrova said, "Have any of your scouts been to the surface yet?" Ossivane blinked. He said, "That is irrelevant to the current negotiation." Ostrova said, "I will take that as a no." She paused. She said, "I would strongly recommend sending a scouting team to the surface before we continue this conversation, specifically to the region designated on your maps as the Northern Continent, the one you want to occupy." Ossivane smiled the smile of a man who believed this was a stalling tactic. He said, "We will not be delaying negotiations over a scouting formality." Ostrova looked at him for a moment. Then she said, very carefully, "Okay." She said it the way you say okay when you know exactly what is about to happen and you have decided that warning someone a second time is not your professional responsibility. The communication ended. Ossivane sent a scouting team 12 hours later, not because of Ostrova's suggestion, but because our satellite imaging showed unusual heat signatures on the Northern Continent, and he wanted confirmation that they were not weapons installations. The scouting team was 40 soldiers, standard light infantry, full kit, our best equipment. They landed in a forested region of the Northern Continent at what our calculations identified as an optimal insertion point. Low human population density, good cover, textbook deployment. I was monitoring their feed from the ship. For approximately 4 minutes, everything was fine. Then one of the scouts, a young soldier named Tev Olar, said, over the comms very quietly, "Something is watching us." His squad leader, Sergeant Brenn Uvach, said, "What?" Tev said, "I do not know what it is. It is very large. It is in the trees. It has not moved." Brenn said, "Lock onto it and identify." There was a pause. Then Tev said, "Sir, the scanner is having difficulty. I think it might be multiple things. I think they might be organized." I leaned toward my monitor. Brenn said, "Animals do not organize." From the audio feed, I heard something that I later spent a long time trying to describe in my report. It was not a growl exactly. It was not a roar. It was the sound of something enormous deciding that the 40 armed soldiers who had just landed in its territory were a problem it was going to address personally. Tev said, "Sir," Brenn said, "I see it." Tev said, "Sir, there are more of them behind us." What followed was 31 minutes of audio and video footage that our biological division later reviewed for a very long time. Our scouts were not killed. They were, however, driven, systematically, strategically, over a distance of 6 kilometers, through terrain that the Northern Continent apparently considered an inconvenience, by a coalition of Earth predators that had, as near as we could determine, no formal communication ability, no coordination mechanism, and absolutely no reason to be working together as effectively as they were. A pack of large canine predators had herded them from the eastern flank. Something enormous and bear-like had pushed them from the north. Smaller, faster creatures had cut off retreat routes with the kind of precise timing that our tactical analysts, reviewing the footage later, described as uncomfortably professional. By the time the scouts made it back to the extraction point, they were intact, uninjured, and completely unable to explain what had happened to them. Sergeant Brenn Uvach's official report contained one sentence that I have thought about many times since. It read, "The planet knew we were there. I filed it. I flagged it. I walked to Ossivane's quarters and knocked on his door. He told me the scouts had probably panicked. I went back to my station. I opened my concerning file. I started a new subfolder. I labeled it, 'We are not ready for this.' I sat down, and I waited for part 2 to begin. Narrated by Vokrath, Senior Intelligence Analyst, Dominion High Command. Field Log, Cycle 7441. Continued. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a military command bridge when everyone knows something has gone wrong, but nobody wants to be the first person to say it out loud. It is a very loud silence. It has texture. You can feel it pressing against the back of your neck. That silence lived on our bridge for approximately 6 hours after the scouting team returned. Admiral Ossivane sat in his command chair and said nothing. He was reviewing the footage. Again, he had watched Sergeant Brenn Uvach's team get systematically relocated across 6 kilometers of northern continent wilderness by animals that, according to every classification system the Dominion used, should not have had the cognitive ability to execute a flanking maneuver. He had watched it 3 times. Each time he watched it with the expression of a man attempting to find the part where his worldview made sense again. He had not found that part. I was at my station, updating my concerning file, which at this point had more subfolders than our entire mission database. Dr. Fen Relava had come up from the biological division and was standing near my console, looking at the footage with the expression of someone who was not surprised but was very, very vindicated. She said quietly, "The bear-adjacent creature, the large one from the northern push. That was a species called a grizzly. They are normally solitary." I said, "Normally," she said. "It coordinated with the canine pack, wolves, also normally territorial against each other." She paused. "Earth predators appear to suspend their usual competitive behaviors when presented with a novel outside threat. They have apparently done this before. There is fossil evidence." I said, "Fossil evidence," she said. "They have been doing this since before humanity existed." She looked at me. "The planet has been practicing." I closed my eyes for a moment. I opened them. I said, "Why was none of this in the main briefing report?" She said, "It was in the appendix." I said, "Nobody reads the appendix." She said, "I know." I added a new subfolder to the concerning file. I labeled it. The appendix was the whole story. Ossivane finally spoke. He turned to his tactical officer, a precise and generally unflappable Dominion veteran named Commander Sev Drathan, and he said, "Prepare a second scouting deployment, larger, full combat configuration. I want the northern continent properly assessed before we resume contact with their representative." Drathan said, "Sir, with respect, the first team encountered resistance from local fauna without any human involvement." Ossivane said, "Correct." Drathan said, "If we send a larger team, we may provoke a larger response from local fauna, still without any human involvement." Ossivane said, "Your point," Drathan said carefully. "My point, sir, is that we have not yet seen what the humans themselves can do. We have only seen what their planet does to uninvited guests. Before we escalate our ground presence, it may be worth resuming diplomatic contact." There was a pause. Ossivane said, "Are you suggesting the animals scared you, Drathan?" Drathan said, "I am suggesting the animals scared everyone on that scouting team, sir, and they were right to be scared. And I would like us to make decisions that account for that." Another pause. "Longer this time," Ossivane said. "Reopen the communication channel. Get me Ostrova." Commander Yael Ostrova appeared on screen within 4 minutes. She was holding a cup of something warm. She looked rested. She looked like a woman who had spent the last 12 hours doing exactly what she expected to be doing, which was waiting. She said, "Admiral," Ossivane said, "your northern continent." Ostrova took a slow sip from her cup. She said, "Yes." Ossivane said, "The wildlife." She said, "Yes." Ossivane said, "Is that typical?" Ostrova set her cup down. She said, "Admiral, I want to be straightforward with you because I think it will save both of us a significant amount of time." She folded her hands on the surface in front of her. "Every continent on this planet has a version of what your scouts encountered. Our oceans are considerably worse. The wildlife did what it did not because anyone told it to, and not because of any technology we deployed. It did it because that is what life on this planet does when something foreign enters its territory. It responds, collectively, without instruction." She paused. "We grew up here. We are technically also part of that ecosystem. We evolved the same way everything else here did." The bridge was very quiet. Ostrova said, "Your scouts landed in a forest in Northern Territory. That forest has been handling outside threats since the last ice age. Your soldiers were loud, they smelled foreign, and they moved in formation, which to the local predator population reads as a competing pack. The forest did what the forest does." She looked at Ossivane directly. "That was not our military response, Admiral. That was just Tuesday." Ossivane said, "Then what is your military response?" Ostrova smiled. It was a small smile. "The kind that does not reach the eyes because it does not need to," she said. "Would you like to find out?" I wrote that down verbatim. I underlined it. I drew a small mark next to it in my notes that I use exclusively to indicate This is the moment everything changed, Ossivane said. I would like to resolve this diplomatically, Ostrova said. That is the first intelligent thing you have said since you arrived. She picked her cup back up. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to receive a data package from us in approximately 10 minutes. That package contains a full assessment of your fleet, compiled over the last 30 hours. Positions, weapon signatures, shield frequencies, engine output variants, crew complement estimates, all 37 ships. She said it the same way someone describes the weather. Factual, calm, mildly bored. We have been watching you since you dropped out of Faster Than Light. We watched you deploy your scouts. We watched you review the footage. We know which ship is yours because you changed your running lights configuration twice, which is a habit, apparently, and habits are easy to track. The silence on our bridge had evolved. It was no longer the silence of people avoiding a problem. It was the silence of people who had just realized the problem was already inside the room with them. Ossivane said, "Nothing for a moment." Then he said, "You have orbital surveillance capability." Ostrova said, "We have significantly more than orbital surveillance capability, but yes, that too," Ossivane said. "Why did you not use it offensively?" And here is where Ostrova said something that I have thought about almost every day since. She leaned forward slightly. She said, "Because we did not need to. Admiral, you brought 37 ships to a planet that has been fighting itself and everything else for 4 billion years. Your scouts ran from animals, in a forest, in the daytime." She tilted her head. "We wanted you to understand the situation clearly before anyone made a decision they could not take back." Drayton next to me said nothing. He was looking at the floor. He was a smart man, smart enough to recognize in that moment that everything he thought he understood about this mission had been assembled incorrectly from the start. Ossivane said, "What are your terms?" Ostrova said, "Leave. That is the term. One term, singular. You take your 37 ships, you go back to wherever your dominion is headquartered, and you file a report that accurately reflects what happened here. You do not misrepresent this encounter. You do not send a second fleet. You do not reclassify this planet as uncontested territory in your records." She said it without anger, without performance, just information delivered clearly. "We are not interested in joining your dominion. We are not interested in being occupied. We are not interested in a second conversation about either of those things," Ossivane said. "And if we decline," Ostrova picked up her cup again. She said, "Then I would recommend not landing anyone on the southern continent. The wildlife there is considerably less patient than the north." She paused. "Also, we would destroy your fleet. But honestly, the southern continent is the more immediate concern." I looked at Ossivane. Ossivane looked at the view screen. On the view screen, Ostrova waited, with her cup, with her folded hands, with the very specific energy of someone who had already decided how this ended and was simply allowing the other party time to reach the same conclusion on their own. Ossivane said, to Drayton quietly, "Plot a withdrawal course." Drayton said, "Yes, sir." He said it immediately. He had clearly already done it. We left Earth's orbit 4 hours later. All 37 ships, in formation, which I suspect looked very dignified from the ground and absolutely nothing else. I filed my complete intelligence report on the return journey. It was long. It had many subfolders. The executive summary was 3 sentences. Earth is not a Class 3 civilization in any meaningful sense. Their planet is an active participant in their defense. We were not prepared and we should have read the appendix. I submitted it to High Command. They sent back a response asking me to rewrite the summary to be less embarrassing. I declined. I saved the original. I labeled it, "What Actually Happened," and I kept it, because someone had to.